What's going on, everybody? How's it going out there? Peter Karunas here with another video, probably my last one of 2020. And in this video, we're going to go over some helpful tips on what you and your sign and print business should be doing when it comes to closing out your books for the year. How could you close out the year on a positive note and look forward to the year ahead? There are a lot of things that we're going to cover in this video, so you're going to have to stay tuned to find out. Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Peter Karunas with Shopbox, and in this video, what we're going to be talking about is closing out the year and some helpful tips on how to do so for your sign and print business. In this video, we're going to assume that you've already pushed your pipeline to the max, that you're trying to close out every sale in your pipeline as you possibly can. You're giving out discounts, you're trying to do everything that you can in order to close that business before January 1. Okay, we're going to assume that you're already doing that. And we're also going to assume that you're already planning, or you have already planned, a holiday party for you and your staff and even some of your better customers to participate in. So here are some helpful tips to help you close out your year in your sign and print business. All right, tip number 1. You are going to want to conduct staff meetings at the end of the year between you and every staff member on your team. In this meeting, you're going to want to go over any type of discrepancies that you think that you've documented throughout the year that you might want to share with that employee. Examples of this might be latenesses, times that they've called out, an abundance of time that they've left early potentially. This is the time where you want to take that one-on-one approach where you can get them back on the straightened path for you. This is also a time where you can go over how they can improve as employees, how they can become better for you and your operation moving forward into the new year. This is also where you'll ask them what you can do as an employer to help them improve in their year. Maybe your production employees need better tools, or maybe they need better vehicles, or maybe your graphic designer needs a faster computer. This is things that they're going to mention to you. These are the things that you're going to want them to tell you in order to do their job better, more efficiently, more profitably. And finally, in these meetings, this is where you really want to recommit to your goals and any goals that you're going to set forth in the upcoming year. And you really want to make sure that those goals align with the goals and ambitions of your staff member that you're meeting with. All right, tip number 2. This is where you're going to analyze your numbers. Most of you are doing this as we speak, but just in case you aren't looking at these metrics, you might want to take a finer look into these particular details. You might want to ask when your best months were. Were you busier in the summertime? Were you busier in the springtime? Were you busier in the wintertime? Knowing this is going to play a very interesting factor when it comes to the next step, which I'll go over in a minute. You'll want to look at where the majority of your customers were coming from. Were the majority of your customers coming in from referrals? Were they coming in from Google? Were they coming in from social media outlets? Were they coming in as your walk-in customers? Were they coming in from what avenue? I think that's really what you want to try and figure out. What stem of your hub were the majority of your customers coming from? Because that's what you're going to want to exploit and target going into next year. Who were the best customers? And I don't necessarily mean which were the best customers, what were your top 5 customers. I mean, what industry were they in? Were they in the automotive industry? Were they in the restaurant business? Were they in the construction and property management industries? Knowing what your target market is, what your target demographic is for your customer base, is only going to improve with raw data that you've collected throughout the year. So take a look at those particular analytics so that it can help you target towards these customers in the future. Okay, tip number 3. Go over your marketing budget for the year. Not the year that you're planning on spending, the year that you've spent. Look at everything. This is where you're going to make adjustments when necessary, whether to throttle up the marketing budget in certain areas or throttle down the marketing budget in certain areas. You might want to throttle up the digital side and throttle down the organic side, the guerrilla side. Maybe you're going to commit less to Chamber of Commerce meetings or networking events because you didn't get much from it from the year. Or maybe you did and you want to throttle it up, whatever the case may be. You're going to want to look at that particular area and throttle up or down accordingly based off of what was working and what was not. You're going to look at your marketing budget here, and you're going to look at what you were not doing. Maybe you decided earlier in the year that you were going to join a networking group, that you were going to invest a few $100s, a few $1,000s in this particular area. And now that maybe it didn't work out, how are you going to reallocate those dollars? Where does that allocation need to be? Maybe it's something that you haven't done this year. Maybe it's something that you want to do going forward years to come. Maybe you're a shop that's not really investing a lot in Google local services or pay-per-click or even social media targeted ads. There's a lot that you can do out there. Press releases, blog articles, SEO. There's a lot that you might want to dump these budgets into these certain buckets. You know, if you have an extra $500, I'm a big advocate here of not putting that $500 into your pocket, but trying to put it in a bucket where it's going to blossom into $5,000, $50,000 over time. The key here is looking at your entire marketing plan as a whole. Which spokes off of your hub need to be removed, need to be adjusted, need to be throttled up or down, need to be added to, whatever the case is. You really need to be looking at your marketing plan at the end of the year, because you're going to have all the data, all the analytics necessary, because you've completed a year's worth of sales, and that data is actually very valuable when making decisions for the future. And finally, tip number 4, closing out your books. The end of the year, too many of us really don't pay attention to our profit and loss throughout the year, and we look at how much we made or how much we grossed at the end of the year. This is not best practices. This is very uncommon for successful entrepreneurs to do. But successful entrepreneurs, successful business owners are looking often at their P&L weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, making sure all the percentages are in line with what they want or as a baseline for the year. At the end of the year, you really want to make your profit and loss as ironclad as possible. It is incredibly important for the success and future growth of your sign and print business in order to maintain all of your category profit and loss percentages. What do I mean by that? Okay. So first and foremost, we all know what we did gross sales wise, right? But let's break that down a little bit. Of your total gross sales, how much of it was broken down into printing? How much of it was broken down into outsourced printing? How much of it was broken down into signs, exterior signs, interior signs? You should have chart of account categories for all of these particular types of income categories so that you can best understand what you're selling. And what you're selling is also very important when you're looking at next year, because you're going to want to sell more of that. Another thing to look at when it comes to gross sales is how much of your gross sales were vended versus how much of your gross sales were done in-house. And then on the flip side of that equation, what are your cost of goods sold? What are your direct costs towards that gross sale number? How much did you spend from this particular vendor? How much did you spend from Fellers, from Grimco, from S&F Supplies? You're going to want to know what that number is. And also, you're going to want to know what your direct labor was to make those particular sales that you had for this year. Is that a number? Is that a percentage that you want to increase or decrease next year? Maybe you were grossly understaffed throughout the year because we had a pandemic, and maybe that percentage is very low and it is in line with where your gross sales are, or maybe it's not. These are certain things that you have to analyze going forward into the next year, whether or not you want to improve or subtract from your P&L. One of the things that you want to do to make your profit and loss ironclad is you really want to look at all of those expenses and make sure that they're allocated to the right category. You don't want your percentages thrown off by putting something what would have been in a general and administrative expense to a cost of goods sold. Here's a helpful tip. Many of us are often going to the hardware store. And what are we buying from that hardware store depends on what category this particular expense is going in. Here's my example. If you're going to Lowe's or Home Depot and you're buying MDF, and you're buying MDF to make a sign out of it, let's just say, this is going to be a cost of goods sold. However, if you're going to that hardware store to buy a broom and a mop to clean up your shop, this is a general and administrative office expense. You bought something from the same supplier, but what it was needs to be categorized in its proper allocation on your profit and loss. Because if you're often just saying, oh, that's a Home Depot expense, that's a Lowe's expense, it's got to go to cost of goods sold, you're not right. You really need to take a deeper dive into your financials. And this is what I mean about making your profit and loss ironclad. You're really going to want to take this time, go over all of those expenses, go over all of those receipts. And if you're ordering online, a lot of these items can be found online in your order history, which would make it a lot easier to allocate what was spent, when it was spent, and what it was for. Now let's talk about the profit and loss percentages. You're going to have many different percentages for each and every particular expense. You can get a percentage of your gross sales that correlate to insurance, that can correlate to payroll, your G&A percentage. At the end of the day, the net profit that you want is determined by how much expenses you've spent and how much you've sold in gross sales. If you're a successful business owner, you would have set baseline benchmarks of these percentages at the beginning of the year. For example, at the beginning of the year, you might have said, I want my payroll to be 30% of my gross sales. Okay, that's fine. If you look at your numbers at the end of the year and you determine that your payroll percentage was around 28%, that's an extra 2% that's going to add to your bottom line. However, if it was 32%, that's 2% that it's taking away from your bottom line. And at the end of the day, what we look at are the percentages. We are not looking at the dollar amount on the P&L. Successful entrepreneurs want to know growth patterns based off of percentage points on a profit and loss. So when you look at last year's profit and loss and look at this year's profit and loss, are you showing significant signs of growth in these areas? Are your payroll percentages pretty much consistent with your gross sales number? Are you looking at your cost of goods sold increasing along with that same percentage of increase? Or are you marginally increasing your cost of goods sold and keeping a close eye on your expenses? Because like I've said before, your profit percentage is grossly affected by what you're spending and how much you're selling. And finally, this is the time where many business owners distribute profits to themselves and to their partners according to their partnership agreements. You could be distributing dividends throughout the year, monthly, quarterly, or yearly, but this is the time where you're often getting at the end of the year and you want to have bonuses given out, or you want to distribute those profits accordingly to yourself and to your business partners. All right, so those are our 4 tips to help you close out your books and your business for the year. I hope that you learned something from this video. Remember, it's very important to have one-on-one staff meetings with your staff. It's very important to look at those numbers and metrics and make decisions for your marketing budget, to analyze your marketing budget, and to finally close out your books, making sure your profit and loss is ironclad. I'm Peter Karunas with Shopbox. I look forward to talking to you all again next year, as this channel is going to go through some really great content. We're going to be throwing things at you left and right, week after week, that we hope are going to improve your sign and print business going forward. And I look forward to seeing you next year. Be honest, be safe, and stay positive out there.